What up everybody? This is the start of a new video. We are now going to be working on drilling all of the holes for the pin block. When I say all, I mean about 263. My neighbor had a great suggestion. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take some spray paint, maybe some primer or whatnot, and I'm just going to spray that over the holes like here. And what that's going to do is that's going to transfer the paint onto the top of the pin block. And then I'm going to go ahead and do all my center punches. And what that's going to do is that paint is going to help give me a visualization of where those pin points are from the center punches. Otherwise, they might be kind of hard to see without. So I'm just going to do that. And the only reason I'm doing this is because I'm planning on repainting the plate. So if you're not planning on repainting your plate, this probably isn't a good idea for you, but since I am, I'm just going to take some primer or paint and just spray over that. That way I have a better idea of where those punches are going to be seen. And then later I'll just go ahead and sand it a little bit and then put new paint on it. Let's get to it. Alright, so we have all of our holes punched, and what I also did is we have two different kinds of holes. There's holes for the tuning pins and then holes for the anchor bolts that secure it to from the plate to the pin block. What I did is I actually went and painted those anchor bolt holes with dark blue, and all the tuning pin holes are going to be the primer, just to kind of help me differentiate the two from each other. That way I wouldn't be confused when they're a lot closer together like these guys are, and then that just helps me to keep them straight. So the next step in this process is to actually go and drill the holes. I'm really thrilled that my neighbor is actually letting me use his mill to do this, so it's going to be a very precise way of doing this. So if you have access to a mill of some kind, like, that is the most ideal and way more fortunate than I was expecting to be able to do. But if you don't have that, you can use a drill press. All right, and here we are over at my neighbor and good friend's shop and using his mill. So again, a quick shout out and thank you to you for letting me utilize your equipment. When you guys are using a mill, you need to make sure that you have it set and tilt forward at a 7-degree angle. And as you can see here in this clip, we use the magnetic leveler to set the depth as opposed to the gauge on the side of the mill, just to be a little bit more accurate. As you can see on the surface of the mill, we actually put a few spacers in here so that we can put the block on top of that. When we're going to set this up, we're actually going to put the flat surface towards the front, just like it would be as if you're playing a piano here. And again, when you're doing that, you want the top tilted forward because your tuning pins are going to be tilted forward as well. You need to make sure that those holes are slanting forward. So just keep that in mind whenever you are getting to the point of drilling your holes. Make sure you have the correct front and the correct back. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put the pin block up here and start clamping it down and getting it so that it is situated and fixed in place. That way it's not going to move around when we're actually doing the drilling. We already actually tested this on the old pin block to make sure that everything's going to work right before we kind of started playing around with the new pin block, just to make sure that if we damage anything, we want to take care of that on the old one and not to damage our new one, as you've already put in a lot of time with it. Before we go ahead and completely clamp this down though, we're going to put some tape on the underside. That way we can prevent as much blowout as possible. Alright, so we have it securely fastened down to the platform. When you're drilling, and if you can control the speed of your drill bit, you want to be going somewhere around 1500 RPMs. If you're replacing your tuning pins with 2-0 tuning pins, you want to be using something somewhere near a 7mm bit. The book has more information on that starting on page 277. The drill bit that I'm going to be using is a 7mm drill bit. Ideally you would want like a 7.1, and you can buy special drill bits online specifically for this thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a 7mm bit, and then I'm going to be reaming out the holes when I actually go to install the tuning pins. Now all that there's left to do is to actually go ahead and start drilling it. Now we have all of the tuning pin holes drilled out, and so now all we got to do is go ahead and work on the screws that hold the pin block to the plate. We're going to go ahead and take our milling machine and we're going to level it back out to 90 or to 0 degrees, and then we're going to go ahead and drill our holes for the correct thickness of our screws. You're going to take the minor width of the screw, and that's what you're going to drill out, and then you're going to countersink the top of it for this part of the screw. Now this is going to be specific for your piano, so just take your calipers and make sure you got the correct width for all these, and so that's what we're going to do now. Alright, as you can see here, we have our new pin block and our old pin block. We basically have all the holes drilled out that we need. There might be a couple that we need to go ahead and finalize. There's a couple on the very outsides of this, and we won't put those in until we kind of get our final dimensions and trim off the pieces on the end that we don't need. I'm going to go ahead and take the anchor screws that go into these countersunk holes, and I'm gonna put them into these before I go and put it up underneath and fit it that way. That way I can get a head start on the threads, and that way it's not so hard and I don't have to hold it up underneath and do that at the same time. So that's what I'm gonna do. So I notice as I'm screwing all of these in, the pin block and the plate are having some separation, about 1/8 of an inch or so. And what I've determined is the problem is that this part of this screw is actually pushing the pin block away from the plate. And so we want to make sure that there's enough clearance for this to go into the pin block, because right now this is just pushing it down. And so I'm going to take a drill and make that hole a little bit bigger so that this can fit into it below the countersunk part. So that's what I'm going to do next. All right, so here's where we're at. We have it screwed on, bolted on, probably screwed on. And as you can see, this is nice and flush with the plate. There's no gap on this side, besides the very back curve, but that's from the carving, not the screws. So we got it well seated onto the plate. All right, and it's looking really good. I'm very pleased with how this turned out. And yeah, so I went the really time-consuming way of doing this, where I put in the screws before putting it onto the plate, just to make it a little easier down the road. You probably don't have to do that. I don't think there would have been that much of a difference if I hadn't done that. But then once I found out that I needed to drill a little bit more, that kind of added some more time to it. In hindsight, if you have screws that are similar to mine in your plate, if you're working on it, I would definitely do this at the drill press or the milling machine, depending on what you're working on. And that would have made it a lot easier and probably a bit less stressful. And definitely if you got to make the top part of it wider for that part of the screw, definitely do it before you thread in the screws. That way it doesn't have a track, because the drill bit just wanted to grip and go down real fast. So yeah, in hindsight, the process I would have taken would have been milling or drill pressing all your holes out, and then at the same time go ahead and make the tops a little bit wider for that bore to go into. And then do your countersinking. I think that's probably the best process in which to do that. I don't think the book really addressed that, so just keep that in mind when you're doing your own. And I think the last thing I need to do with this pin block is to put some kind of lacquer or finish on it. The book has a recommendation. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but I'm gonna go do some reading and double check what that is, and I'll let you know here in a second. All right, so what it is we actually need to put a coat of shellac on this, and that's going to keep it from humidity changes and stuff like that. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and take the pin block off now that we have it fitted to it and we know it's good to go. That's what we're going to do next, and that's probably how we're going to finish this video. Yeah. Alright, so the next thing I have to do is I have to start shaving down a little bit, because this is a little bit too wide. I think I'm just going to use like a hand planer and try to shave off a little bit at a time on this end, because I have a little bit more wiggle room here than I do over here, because you can see that's really close to the edge and I want to utilize as much as I can. So that's what I'm going to do next. Alright guys, so as you just saw, I just put the plate back in the cabinet, and I'm very excited to see that my holes in the pin block and the holes in the top of the plate have lined up. That's so exciting, and very, very satisfying. Now I'm gonna go ahead and you'll see that these are like, if I'm straight above this one, it's off just a little bit, but it's within, you know, our parameters or whatnot. But I think that once I go ahead and put these bolts in, it's gonna kind of shift it over a little bit and just kind of like perfect it. Now, I only have the 2 lag bolts underneath this plate part right here inside the pin block. These are the only 2 that are in right now, holding the pin block to the cabinet. Over here on this side, you can see inside of there, I don't have that one in yet, mostly just because I wanted to see how these were lined up and where I was at this point. Now, with that in mind, I can get the flashlight in here. It's hard to tell from up here, but that where the hole is in the pin block to secure the pin block to the cabinet is not over the original existing hole. So what I'm gonna have to do is actually drill down into that and create a new hole That way it has something to grip onto, because I don't think I want to move this. I'm happy with where it's at right now. I'm so excited with how this turned out, considering this is my first project ever doing this. Yeah. Guys, thank you so much for watching this. Surely this is going to be an incredibly long video. The next stop is to go ahead and paint the plate, and then I'm going to go ahead and start reassembling it into the living room. If you haven't, please subscribe, give me a like, share it with your friends if you think somebody else could benefit from this. Otherwise, have a wonderful day. Thanks, bye.